This is the 5th battle in the Total War Center team tournament. A 2 versus 2 tournament with a Pre-Marian Roman theme. And here we have the Julii commanded by Merko and Mr. Longbowman. They'll be facing off against the Scipii commanded by Confused Johnny, aka Emotion Name, and Made in the UK. Now both of these armies have fought before in this tournament, and they have both adapted by changing the composition of their units. Interestingly though, they've done so in completely the opposite direction from one another. The Julii have taken an even more heavily infantry-centric force than they did in their first battle, taking 23 units of infantry, that's 13 Principes, 6 Triarii and 4 Hastati, and only 5 archers this time around, as well as 1 unit of onagers, presumably with the intention of using it to provoke the enemy into attacking them. While the Scipii have taken 20 archers, that's a 4-to-1 archery advantage over the Julii, 19 equites and 1 Roman general, a force composed entirely of archers and cavalry, in other words. Now the Julii are fighting defensively, they have little choice. Here Johnny makes what appears to be a play to send a unit of cavalry after the Julii archers in the hope of securing an early knockout of their archer capability. It didn't work, as you can see. Now Made in the UK on the Scipii left has sent his force to cover the flank of the Julii, where his archers can fire from high ground into the Julii mass there. Both armies of the Julii have formed up into a defensive position, while Johnny does much the same thing from the other side. Here we see Made in the UK making a suicide charge on the Julii onagers in the hope of knocking them out, and fails. I guess he presumed that since he had so many cavalry units, and since the Julii are fixed in place by their static tactics, he could afford to expend a unit in that futile attempt. And he was right. This is a good play from Johnny here. During the archery storm that they unleash against the Julii, he moves a couple of his archery units, expendable, cheap, within range of the pillar from these infantry, causing them, since they've been set on fire at will, to waste their pillar. That reduces their effectiveness even further. The dynamics of this situation, if you haven't seen it yet, is that Julii infantry cannot catch Roman archers who've been set to skirmish, so all they can do, since they have no cavalry force, is to simply sit there and take their punishment, in the hope that the Scipii will run out of ammunition. Here you see that the Scipii are diverting Julii attention with moves to cause alarm in their rear, which they can do with impunity, I think, since the Julii archers, all 5 units of them, are busy dying. Swamped. Look at that, a single Julii archer left. Look at all those corpses. They've been swamped by 20 units of archers. Julii archery capability has been eliminated. And now they are massing their archer fire against 1 unit at a time in the hope of creating a weakness in the Julii line. And that's what they've achieved. You can see there's a gaping hole in the corner there. What do the Julii actually need to do here? Well, this map, Italian lowland, contains quite a lot of trees over to one side of the battlefield, and infantry in trees are given protection from archer fire, which is less effective to them while they're in the tree line, and cavalry will also suffer from a severe disadvantage fighting in trees. The Julii realise that at this point, and they've sent all their troops rushing for the tree line. Unfortunately, their position has been made so vulnerable to Scipii positioning that they can strike at the infantry at will from the rear and flanks, as you see here, with varying degrees of success. It slows them down, causes them to become dislocated, causes units to isolate, and hence become vulnerable to being swamped and affected by the concerned by number of enemy morale factor. And of course infantry units are less effective against cavalry when they are charged while on the move. They aren't braced to receive the charge. And here you see isolated units being ripped apart one at a time. It's almost painful to watch, in fact. The Scipii know that they have to take advantage of their opportunity to bag as many of these infantry units before they can reach the tree line as they can. Oh, that's gruesome. That's the general dying there. That was not an honourable way to die. Now that the Julii are actually beyond the tree line there, as you can see, they're dealing death to the foolish cavalry who are trying to follow them in. It's their best chance there. So what the Scipii have to do now is do their best to lure Julii units out from the tree line and administer a hail of archery-related death, followed up by cavalry charges to the rear as the Julii flee back into the tree line. And as you can see here, Julii units are being lured in that way. I wonder what would have happened if the Julii had realised the nature of the Scipii plan the moment that they saw their dispositions, and at the very beginning of the battle had sent their whole army into the woods. Certainly they would have had to abandon their artillery, since artillery can't be taken into woodland, but they would have been much better protected from archery fire there, and against any attempt to follow them into the trees with cavalry. But of course then it would have come down to a test of patience as to who was prepared to attack first, whether the Julii would come out from the trees or whether the Scipii would go in. I'm not completely convinced that it's such a terrible idea for battles to be fought with a time limit to prevent precisely that kind of situation occurring. Anyway, as you can see, the Scipii appear to have run out of most of their arrows, and they're sending their archers in. Presumably they're doing this in the hope that when they rout, the infantry will be lured out following them, out from under the tree line, where they can be hit by cavalry. Also, it keeps them from recuperating their fatigue levels, and besides, as foot troops, archers are not affected by the detrimental effects of fighting in the trees, so there's no reason not to use them up first. Now here you see that the two armies have massed all of their remaining cavalry from all sides of this knot of trees, and basically they're just going to squash those Julii infantry like an egg with one gigantic charge. Force of shock and sheer weight of numbers, and the fact that their morale has been whittled down by constant archery fire, will create the beginnings of the cascade of panic that spells the beginning of rout. This is brutal, visceral. I can almost imagine the sweating, stinking terror of these Julii foot soldiers as they realise that their gods have failed them, that their sacrifices were in vain, and that the Scipii are now going to seize their lands, their women, their cattle. Here you see that basically the Scipii are completing the mopping up process by hunting down the last couple of units who were hidden in the trees, and by surrounding and mobbing them in that way, they simply don't stand a chance, which is a pity, really, for them. The hunt continues, and this is the very last infantry unit. And you see that the defensive power of infantry fighting against cavalry in the woods is such that even in the face of all that weight of cavalry, they still manage to hold on for a while. Very much like a piece of mucus in my nostril, in fact.